Interview prep. I love an interview. And I know some of you are probably watching this like, okay, I'm going to tune her out now. This is not who I want to talk to. But I will say this. Interviews are really an amazing opportunity for you to showcase who you are. If you are an extrovert and you know that you can woo a room or connect with people, that's something that can't be captioned in a resume. If you're an introvert, but you're extraordinarily passionate about the law or about environmental justice or whatever makes you tick, speaking about that and having your passion come through is a great opportunity to bring your application to life. I will say for Harvard in particular, and this was something that my interviewer said, is that I gave him the tools, and he used the terminology weapons, to be able to go into that room and advocate for me. That it's really an opportunity to say something else that wasn't captured in your diversity or your personal statement. I'll say the best way to prep for an interview is to, one, read your resume. They are going to read your resume. They're going to ask you questions based on your resume. And so it's really important that you know what's on there. Say two, be ready for any question. I think I was asked a question, if you could be a fly on the wall in any room or any moment in history, where would you be and why? And so these are really questions that can come out of left field, something that you've never anticipated having to answer before. And so I will say three, which is coupled with two, take a deep breath. It's okay. You don't have to talk at the speed of light. They are timed interviews, but at the end of the day, having a thoughtful response is better than just your way through it. So I would say those are my three tips. Read your resume, and I would say, even to add to that, be familiar with your personal statement and diversity statement and be prepared to answer questions about that. I would say two, again, be ready for any question that can come out of nowhere. Fly on the wall, what president would you be and why, all of those things. But don't stress, because at the end of the day, they're just trying to figure out who you are. And third, but certainly not least, breathe before your answer. So I love when people ask, what did you know about Harvard before you interviewed? And I know there are certain people in my class, love them to death, but they were the people who are like, I knew I wanted to go to Harvard since I was this big and I had this sweatshirt and we came to visit when I was 6. I did not touch the state of Massachusetts before I moved into Harvard, but before I came to visit and knew that Harvard was what I wanted to do. But let's be very clear, Harvard was not what I wanted to do from birth. And so there's only so much you can know about it from websites and from talking to people. So I would say, if you're somebody who's nervous about being asked what specific clinical do you have to take and what courses do you want to have and what all-star professor do you want to take classes with, first of all, take a second, breathe. I probably said breathe a lot during this thing, but it's important to just ground yourself. I had a relative familiarity with certain clinics that I wanted that were based on my interest. I came in really wanting to pursue criminal legal work. And so one of the best clinics that you can take in the country, I'm not biased, maybe a little bit, is the Criminal Justice Institute. So I made sure that I was familiar with, what that was and what it sought to do. In terms of professors, I didn't know many, and I wasn't asked about it. They did ask about what courses I wanted to take, but I spoke about what I was interested in, generally speaking, that I was interested in constitutional law, civil rights, and what protections or lack thereof the Constitution affords to people of color, Black people, queer identified folks, you name it. And so I talked about that and wanting to learn from the best and brightest law professors in the country. And that's okay to answer just like that. You are not expected to memorize the course catalog and every professor who has ever written an article about anything who's at Harvard. That is not an expectation. It's cool though to familiarize yourself with a couple of things so they know that you did your research and that you're generally interested in Harvard beyond the name.
Hello, everyone. So Rachel and I are going to kind of go through what an interview with Harvard Law School or a law school interview might look like. So we're going to go straight from the top, and I just have my interview questions. So in advance of this, I would have read through Rachel's application and have a few questions for her to get to know her a little bit better. It should take about 10-15 minutes, and we're going to kind of debrief a little at the end. So Rachel, thank you for sitting down with me today. I am excited to chat. We're going to chat for about 15 minutes. And I have a few questions. I've read through your application, and if you see me looking off to the side, I'm just taking a look at my notes. But other than that, we can go ahead and get started. So looking at your experiences so far, I've learned a lot about you, and I really want to hear in your own words, what motivates you to pursue law school, but particularly to pursue it now?
Yes, so I guess there are two different responses. So on an early level, I first kind of just became interested in the law as a concept. So I grew up, although I grew up in Florida, most of my family is from the South, the deep South. And my dad grew up in the 1950s in a time of segregation. And actually, when he was in high school, his high school was desegregated, so faced that time around integration. So hearing his stories about the impact of Brown v. Board, I was always just interested in the law as something that is both a catalyst for change, but also how the law has been a barrier, particularly in the South. So I was always just interested in studying and unpacking that. And then when I was in college, I was a history major and I became interested in a lot of international issues from human rights to trade to development. And I had an opportunity to intern at both the Department of Energy and the Department of State. And I met a lot of government lawyers there. And I was very interested in the ways they approach issues, particularly, like I said, on development, human rights, and trade, and seeing how the law, policy, and history all combined, and just really learning how to critique those things. And that's one of the things just academically why I wanted to go to law school. And also, I've always also been interested in a lot of issues surrounding education. As I mentioned, the Brown v. Board decision with my dad, and even the high school that I went to had a lot of disparities with other high schools in the district. So also just learning about those kinds of issues and what tools I could use as a lawyer to help combat that and go back to my home community was always of interest to me.
Thank you. So you chatted a little bit about the experiences you had working in government in DC with that international lens. What do you think, and you shared a little bit about this already, was your biggest takeaway from those experiences or that setting in terms of the nature of that international work? And how do you feel those reflections have strengthened your preparation for law school?
Yeah, so during those experiences, on one hand, I had a lot of opportunities to observe government lawyers, but I guess I can just use the one with the Department of State. So as I mentioned, as a history major, I just really studied a lot of international issues, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa. So at the Department of State, I have an opportunity to work in the Office of Nigerian Affairs. So just really understanding just the deep, like I said, the connections between policy and history. And those experiences gave me a long-term experience of just thinking about the world and how things connect, and also just getting some experience in development and human rights issues. So I would say that's on the one hand. And then just taking away from those experiences, just a lack of diversity that I saw in those fields, particularly in the Department of State. In the Sub-Saharan Africa office, I was the only Black intern. There were probably only one other Black person who worked in that particular office. And just some of the misunderstandings that I saw, for example, I can even go into a specific example. For one of the economic affairs officers, we were talking about corruption and just things that the United States could do. And his opinion was that corruption was endemic to certain cultures. So I had to educate him just on the impacts of history, colonialism, Western imperialism, and just really understanding the need for more diverse representation and people who actually care about history and studying and really just trying to critique things and understanding the way they are today.
Absolutely. And so thinking about the experiences that you've had and kind of the figures that you've encountered throughout your experiences so far, can you tell me a little bit about a legal professional, whether that's historical, current, or even fictional, that has inspired you and kind of lends to your vision for law?
Yeah, so thinking just most recently right now, probably I would say Bryan Stevenson. So I'm sure many of us have seen the movie Just Mercy. And although I was exposed to him before then, that just kind of crystallized my admiration for him. As someone who wants to go back to the South to do work, I greatly admired someone who went to Harvard and then chose to go to Alabama and work on a lot of systemic injustices that are going on in the South. And then I'm also very much against the death penalty, and just learning about some of the work that he was doing and the way the system has been administered discriminatorily towards Black and brown people, and looking at the ways the legal system can help people just very much in their real lives. So I just very much admired the work that he was doing and the organizations that he was able to start, and just being able to, I think so many times people who go to elite institutions, they tend to cluster in the New York, DCs, the LA. So once again, I just admire someone who's just able to use those skills and go back to the communities that really need that assistance as well.
And I want to backtrack just a little bit, because you said something really interesting earlier about kind of educating folks in the roles that you've had before. Can you give another example or kind of talk a little bit more about the experience of navigating those difficult conversations that you had in your internship experience, but either academically as well, and how those conversations went and how you went about them?
Yeah, so I think just having an understanding sometimes of when you're having the difficult conversations. I can take that one that I gave you as an example, particularly if that person is a superior. Sometimes you can't directly call someone out, so maybe you want to call them in and figure out the best ways to educate them while also expressing your very real concerns about just things that you have disagreements about. So I found the way to navigate those situations is also, it's helpful to bring in personal anecdotes and experiences. So when I was speaking with this person about those issues and how what he said was extremely problematic about corruption being endemic and having that just no correlation to history. And I talked about some of my real world experiences, just life experiences growing up in the South, having family members who've been subjected to the criminal justice system as well. And just being able to tie that to real world experiences and telling people how problematic that their thoughts are as a way to educate them about the impact that some of their statements, particularly when they're in in leadership positions, can have upon people. So I think you can do that, particularly when you're talking to a superior as well.
And kind of thinking about other experiences that you had, is there any experiences that you had or a time in your professional or academic career that you could change a decision, and what would that decision be, and why?
Yeah, so although I think most of my experiences, even some of the ones that I may have viewed, not as well, they've all led me to where I am today. So on the one hand, I don't particularly regret anything, but on the other hand, I think just in thinking about, because I'm interested in a lot of international affairs and just how global and globalized our world is becoming, I think I would have liked to have developed more language skills. Although I took a French class in college and in high school, I just think to be able to communicate with people, particularly in their language, and to be able to just understand the way language operates in our society. So growing up in Florida, it would have been wonderful to have learned Spanish. And just thinking now, as I said, because I'm interested in international work, whether that's Mandarin or if you're interested in working in sub-Saharan Africa as well, Swahili is another global language. So just being able to communicate with people. And I think that's very important for people, particularly who want to go into international work, and also just thinking about the different, just how diverse American society is becoming. So that's something I wish I would have taken more seriously at an early age.
Thank you so much, Rachel, for all of the context and kind of reflections that you shared. Can I ask you one final question? Do you have any questions for me about HLS, the community, anything?
Yeah, so in some of my research of HLS, I was really interested, and I found it unique that HLS has these 1L reading groups. And I so just was interested in you answering just more questions about what's that experience, what's the selection process, and what are just some of the options that are available to students. Do they get academic credit for it? So I'd just be interested in learning just more about what's the criteria for those.
Absolutely. So yes, in the 1L year, students have the opportunity to take reading groups, and they are not for credit. They are an opportunity, really a mentorship opportunity. It's one of the opportunities that students have to connect with our faculty in an issue area that they're most excited about. And so every year they're a bit different, and they're taught by kind of the faculty in their particular fields across the board. So we have them on law and technology, we have them on law and civil rights, and taught by a leading faculty member in that area. And this year, for example, there are about 65 in a range of areas for students. And students sign up for them in the way that they do for courses. And they typically end up being about 5 to 12 students. So again, these tight-knit groups where you can kind of dive into the academic study with the guidance of a faculty member. So a bit more relaxed and really more of a mentorship opportunity, but yes, you do have access to those as a 1L. And there are upper level reading groups once you kind of leave your 1L year. We want to continue that, but that first year we really want to make sure that students have that opportunity, that they can choose to do it, but also that it's easy for them. So I hope that clears it up a little bit.
No, thank you very much.
Of course, of course.